You're a busy professional. You don't have time for fluff. You need strategies that work, and you need them fast. Welcome to Busy Pro Fast Wellness with me, your host, Alan Welsh. We're here to give you science-backed hacks and actionable tips to boost your focus, minimize friction, and maximize your results. Less time, more impact. It's time to get well, stay strong, and thrive. Let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to Busy Pro Fast Wellness. I'm your host, Alan Welsh, and today I'm joined by Tarek Michael Chouja. I'm not sure about the pronunciation of the last bit there, but he is the co-founder of the Functional Training Institute and the host of the Purpose Driven Movement podcast. Tarek's particularly well known for helping fitness leaders and everyday people unlock efficient, functional training that actually fits into their lives. So, if you've ever wondered about how to train smarter, move with a purpose, and stay motivated when time is tight, this episode is for you. Tarek, it's a real pleasure to have you on the pod. Thanks so much for joining me this morning. Well, for me anyway, in France. I'd like to ask you, is there anything that I've missed from the very brief introduction? I'm sure there's many things you can add.
Perfectly brief and concise introduction. You said the name really well. It rolled off brilliantly. And I'm happy to be here, Alan.
All right, thank you. That's great. I'm really pleased. And well, let's just sort of like move into a few things that I'm really intrigued about. So one of the areas that I'm fascinated about, because it's a crossover with what I'm doing, is fast and functional wellness for busy professionals. So obviously, Tarek, you focus a lot on efficiency at the Functional Training Institute. So for someone who's juggling like a 9 to 5, do you have one functional training principle to maximize results in minimal time?
Yeah, there's a few ways that we can sort of approach that question. What we do at Functional Training Institute is education focused, for professionals, fitness, wellness, health, but also for anyone who's just interested to learn more about movement. And in particular, this concept of functional training, which is more integrative, has more of an integrative approach. Now, it doesn't dismiss the traditional notions of training. It complements those. But if you were to have two spectrums, on the left would be your traditional training. So that would be your machine. If we looked at a classic gym setting, gymnasium, you'd have your equipment, machine-based primarily, that works on compartmentalizing. So whether it's a chest press or a leg press or leg curl. On the far right, if you like, we've got now your functional stuff, your kettlebell training, your integrative kind of concepts, your functional tools that we call it, battling ropes, all of the things that are complementary and necessary, we would call functional training. To differentiate between function and functional, sometimes we do need to isolate to focus on function to then kind of go from isolation to integration. And that's where functional training comes into it. I wanted to really elaborate on the concept of functional training if people don't really know about it or it's vague. In the background here, you can see I've written the best-selling book, Purpose Driven Movement, which is also the podcast, name of the podcast. It's a whole system of functional training, how to coach, how to assess, how to move, and how to program. So functional training, we honor all of those in our education and our programs. And yes, in terms of efficiency, the way that we provide those programs for professionals are consumed efficiently. So it's all self-paced, it's all for high performers, and we give lifetime access. So in terms of what we do, I wanted to paint a bit of a picture. In terms of how we would promote how someone would train, yes, efficiency is important, but so is consistency and so is long-term longevity in terms of how consistent you are over a course of weeks, months, years. And that's truly our focus. And you can become efficient, meaning that we avoid teaching and preaching, if you like, wearing down the body with hardcore training all the time. So it is, yes, as you alluded to earlier, Alan, smart programming, smart training, which would coexist with the idea of efficiency. And I really want to make a point that
Yeah.
efficiency isn't just doing something in necessarily a short amount of time.
Yeah.
It's also being efficient with the way we move. So movement of economy, for example, and making sure we don't wear down our tendons, our joints, and really our nervous system ultimately, which
Yeah.
also will dictate our psychology.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much for that rundown. And having looked at the website as well, and obviously listened to the podcasts, I can see that sort of that whole area that you've just alluded to, having that distinction between those different elements comes right through. And I will say that it's really clear everything that you're providing. And I did download the book as well, because I thought, I really want to get heads up on what's going on. And that's fantastic. I mean, obviously, we're going to filter down at the moment. You also talk as well, I've realized that, about these sort of mental barriers, more of a holistic approach, which I'm definitely intrigued about, without wanting to go too much in that extreme of the sort of hippy-dippy stuff,
Sure.
because that's not the object here. And I always try, wellness is not about that. It's not about, necessarily being there and getting up at 6 o'clock and doing an hour's of meditation. That's not the whole object here. It really is. There is an element of
Sure.
in naturally incorporating this stuff into your day to day without being too time consuming, and that comes through as well with what you're doing too. So I really appreciate that. For me, there's one question: do you have a top mistake that busy folks sort of tend to make when they are training or attempting to train efficiently?
Look, I've run a couple of gymnasiums in the past in Sydney, and I've taught in many locations with different types of facilities. One being the gymnasium, I ran a couple of functional training facilities. So the common problem that we sort of saw was we aim to economize and make the class as efficient and effective as possible. 45 minutes, very structured, more small group kind of training. That was the sole purpose of Primal Energy Fitness, which still exists in St. Peters in Sydney. So what we started to see, Alan, was a trend of people actually overtraining. So they kind of were almost, well, not almost, became addicted to training. And even though they were busy folk, they managed to fit a session in the morning and then in the evening. And they thought that by cramming in that they were doing something good because they were perceiving it as being efficient, and on one hand, and in an interesting sort of perspective. And then on the other hand, they were just doing it to gain results quicker as well, right? So it was a bit of a conundrum that they were facing. So we needed to kind of shed light on recovery and the importance of not breaking down the body's tissue and lean muscle mass and so forth, and also mentally, fatigue is a big thing in terms of loss of form and therefore loss of efficiency, all because they were trying to cram in too much. So we had to re-educate them on recovery, and less is more is one of the principles that I'd like to talk about, which is probably hand in hand with efficiency. So we brought in recovery classes. We trained them on recovery principles, breath work, stuff that they could, stretching, and then also passive modes such as massage, if that was an option for them, or anything to realign and create a new set point for them in their physiology.
Yeah, fantastic. Because that's one of the main concerns I guess many people do have, is overdoing stuff and then obviously having to deal with injuries in the long term because they put too much in to, and I guess the idea of recovery is really fundamental in anything, having that knowledge that you really do need to have those periods when you are resting and resetting so that you can optimize your health in the long term. And again, that's one of the things that I've noticed from your podcast, is that you do mention that.
Yeah, it's a common thread, a theme that's interwoven throughout. I suppose how I deliver and what I say, and hopefully what I do.
Yeah.
But my point earlier was that efficiency is over a long term, a long period. It's not something that we have a 3-month goal and that's it.
Yeah.
Because that sets the person back. So it's important that person though finds what that efficiency is, whether they're better training in the morning.
Yeah.
They're more adept in the evening, and then finding that sort of 30 minutes to 1 hour and then putting in those particular exercises. If it's aerobic only, okay, well, that could form part of their routine. But that would be part
Yeah.
of their weekly cycle. It could include a brisk walk, or a run, being on the bike, for example, anything that sort of steady state. But if you want to become efficient in terms of sort of more metabolic conditioning, throw in strength and a bit of power, you don't need 2 hours or hour and a half. I mean, if you want to equate yourself to an athlete who needs to prep and prime and so forth, well, do that. But I think most people want to, okay, there are competitive people, personalities, mindsets who love to push themselves, and that's fine too. But just sort of be a bit
Yeah.
judicious in your decision making to enter into, activities that might break and wear you down. Not to say don't do them, but preparation is really important. Whether that's recreational or sporting and Alan, that's what it is. Because otherwise, if there's a setback or an injury, where's efficiency in all of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's something which I suppose people need to bear in mind. We all do, because, I mean, we can go off on a tangent and get set in our ways. So, yeah, that's really good. Thanks for explaining all of that. And there is an idea here that I keep on asking different people. And it's like this concept of, if you're stuck at your desk all day, is there a 5-minute reset routine that people could squeeze in between tasks?
Most definitely. I mean, here am I seated, and I think yourself too. And I don't sit down for long periods, and whether it be 30 minutes, 45, it's cultivating awareness too. Like if I'm like this and talking to you, and like,
Yeah.
that becomes a habit over time. So it becomes a dysfunctional posture, and we become aware of that,
Yeah.
right? And so that 5 minutes, again, this is anecdotal, it's experiential. I've discussed this with many other people, high performers, etc. So there's no hard and fast research on what I'm about to share. So just point number one. Point number two, it's direct experience, meaning you need to try it. If that's what, because if I say something, someone, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Well, okay, it's not just about being a good idea. So try this. First 5 minutes, avoid your phone, meaning checking messages, and because that wakens up the stress response far too soon, meaning you get into a certain mode, and that mode becomes more urgent. I need to check
Yeah.
what that email is about or what that message is about. Obviously, if it's an emergency, that's a different story. But a lot of times, we make things more urgent and turn it into an emergency than it needs to, right? So notwithstanding real emergencies, just avoid the phone. If you haven't got into a morning routine or anything of that nature, try that. Just avoid the phone and then do a light stretch or a walk. That walk can be 5 minutes. And then lo and behold, you can build that up so that it becomes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, and sort of have that as your sacred time. And, we talk about high performers, whether you've got, children, grandchildren, you're juggling pets, and you've got all these things. Just find that space and build it up to at least 30 minutes of your own uninterrupted time. And if that means getting up a little earlier, try that, because, and then guess what? That really sets up the rest of the day and gets you into that frame of mind to tackle the stresses and all of those things to begin the day. That would be one example, Alan, of a 5-minute routine. And then you can become more specific around that. So I've got at least 30-minute sort of formula, and that includes stretching, breath work, meditation.
Yeah.
Whether you're faith-based, I'll say a prayer. So anything like that to kind of connect, from my perspective, with God or the divine, and kind of have that time to oneself, and being able to disconnect from everything that's busyness, that's technology.
No, I love all of this. I really do. This is something which keeps on sort of cropping up, and I'm starting to utilize. Well, I have been for getting on for a year now, and I've noticed the great difference in my own peace of mind as well. And it doesn't have to. I mean, I started off being quite drastic with this at the beginning. I was reading a book by Robin Sharma, and it was sort of the 5 a.m. club, and I was like going full hog to the 5 a.m. and getting up, which really I've decided to not to follow that to that extreme anymore. So now what I'm doing is just getting up slightly. You can do that by 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You can build it up to get up slightly earlier, and that time that you can have for yourself to reflect, to do those simple tasks, those simple movement tasks, whether that be a short walk or a few morning exercises, stretches, whatever, is really, it does set you up for the day. So yeah, I would agree with you on that totally.
It does. Yeah, and I make a point on that, Alan, is that there are people that are professing some good stuff out there, but it still doesn't point to the fact that we're all individual, that there's key differences, and that means maybe someone's not a morning person, so the formula is not 5 a.m. It's another 8 a.m. It's 10 a.m. It's because there are people who do night shifts. There are there are so many variances, and so one really needs to find that time in that space.
Yeah.
And okay, you can get inspired by Sharmas of the world or others, including what I'm saying, but ultimately you need to take control and try something. And then what I would say is whether you use a diary like I do.
Yeah, I do.
Just a tracker. So in the morning I have a non-negotiable. This becomes my non-negotiable. And I put my morning flow, and it includes walking the dogs. It includes connecting in different ways. And then I'll kind of, for me, I'm very task focused. So I'll tick it off. And then at the end of the week, I'll go, okay, my habit tracker is, I aim to do that at least 6 times. One day of the week, I'm sort of relaxed. I like to sleep in and have no alarm. Although I don't need the alarm to wake up these days. I just wake up naturally, put it on just in case. Just track it though. So just track it and start with 5 minutes and just let it be organic, don't that's one thing that from your point that I used to do was try to follow strict formulas, and I put too much in and on, right? I'm a bit of a taskmaster unto myself, and I thought, no, this isn't working. I became a bit anxious and really unhappy when I couldn't quite finish the routine or formula. So make it a habit, a high performance habit, rather than just something that, got to do this again, And then note the difference. Note the difference in your physiology. Like, how do you feel after that 5 minutes, after that 10 minutes? And I can tell you, it makes a world of difference. It's something that I always go back to, whether I've done travels for work or whatever else, I'm drawn back to that reconnection.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I'm so excited that you mentioned these things, especially the idea of, well, one of the things you mentioned, the journal or the habit tracker. And I've never in my entire life until about 2 months ago been into data, tracking anything like that. It's just something which I think, I'm never going to do that. But I've started doing it myself, but on a piece of paper. And this is just one day there. And I'm just showing people that are listening, they won't see this. But it's got all the data for everything. But it takes me literally 30 seconds to fill out these little boxes. And I wouldn't want to do anything that's arduous, so that could be, just to give some examples here, it will be food, it will be morning exercise, family, friends, social, piano, trumpet, because these are important things to me to practice, and also my relationship with my wife, that comes up there. That always gets a pretty high score, I have to say. That's important. So these things, they are, for me, though, never data in my life. I've always thought that was for geeks. It really does help just to have that, because then you have a kind of a focus. One of the things is alcohol, because I've had issues in that. I've been open about that in the past, not for the last 3 years, but I was drinking far too much. So that now I'm tracking anything with alcohol. I drink very, very little now compared to what I would drink in the past. So that's up there as well. All of these things.
Yeah, that's serving you, right? You're always going to ask, how does this serve you? And that data becomes part of that sort of meaningful process.
Exactly. That's great. Great, thanks. So, I'd also look at this idea of mindset and performance habits. So, because you talk a lot about purpose-driven movement. And when I first heard this, I was thinking, well, what is that? I don't really know. It's not totally clear. And you've mentioned as well that you want to avoid any vagueness with that concept. So how can someone who's not a fitness pro start infusing that purpose into their workouts to feel better in their body?
Sure, yeah. Look, we're discussing these high performance habits, routines that one might desire to inculcate into their everyday life. And so that's the idea. What's your purpose-driven morning habit? Your purpose-driven. So the idea is that purpose-driven then becomes a precedent, right, for whatever it is. In this case, we talk about movement. And so when we're purpose-driven, meaning that, the exercises that we choose have a purpose behind the program that we're doing, the setting, the environment. If we decide to go to the beach or the park or the woodlands and do a trek, or go for a swim in the ocean or the lake or wherever, or go classically to a gym, well, there's purpose-driven movement behind that. What is the purpose behind what you're doing? And it doesn't mean that, okay, I suppose it does not necessitate that you need data for every single thing that you're undertaking or doing. It's ultimately enjoying that process, that activity.
No, of course not.
But which adds purpose to one's life. So you can get a lot more particular or minutia with it, meaning that, okay, if you are a coach or you really want to become analytical, then the purpose-driven will become a little bit more microscopic, a little bit more zoomed in. So, the details of what you're doing, the data, the how many times a day, and that's fine, and that serves some people. Keep doing that. But for others, that might not be as important because they just enjoy it and they know the benefits and they feel better, and when they don't do it, they don't feel as good. So what's the ultimate purpose? It could be that someone's focusing in on a recreational activity that could be a marathon ultimately, or it could be becoming a better rock climber. So if it's a recreational sport, becoming better at football. Okay, well, how do we then incorporate purpose-driven activities to help facilitate and foster better outcomes for that particular activity or sport? That's another perspective behind it.
Yeah, good. You mentioned as well, I think, before about the why as well. Why you would do this? What is the long-term outcome in your mentality? I suppose would that play into that idea? Because would you like to sort of shed a bit more information on that for listeners that haven't listened to your podcasts? The ultimate why in pursuing these types of things.
Yeah, there could be an ultimate outcome, or it could just be that the reason that you undertake an activity is the why could be recreational, to hang with people. So you've got a communal element and that could be the ultimate why. Even though there are other good byproducts. One, getting fitter, getting stronger, for example, getting more proficient or more skilled at that activity. But the ultimate why could be just to hang out with people and have that emotional side. The other why could be that someone prefers to switch off and, they're busy at work and all of these things. So they put their headphones on and headset and bash out some weights. And I've known many people who find that meditative. They find it just amazing for them. And I go, kudos to you. So you need to find your why, whether that's, bashing weights, pushing weights in the gym, whether it's hanging out, doing a group training class. So some people might be inclined and that becomes their why, becomes more community-based and knowing that they're getting the benefits. So, the psychological and the physiological stuff intertwine here. They can't be disconnected and they'll affect each other. So that's sort of, hopefully that clarifies that, Alan, is
sure.
once pursued why becomes a way for not just escapism. I don't want to become reductionist in why someone would put the headsets on and go for a jog. I often wondered, when you're out in nature, like, I'm not going there to judge people and say, okay, well, just hear the birds, or because each to their own, and it could be a good valid reason, and so that hopefully answers.
No, it does. It totally does. There was a couple of points there. One is the idea that I've noticed that, for example, myself, there are times when your moods are different, so therefore you are going to approach any particular exercise or activity in a different way. So there are times when maybe I will want to listen to some music when I'm out, but more often than not, if I'm in nature, then I probably won't, because as you say, I become more aware of the auditory senses, and especially for me, auditory is probably more important than visual to a large extent. So that's more powerful for me when I do any kind of reset, which is like a couple of minutes with a very quick visualization or a meditation of things, I'll probably listen more to what's going on in the distance, a long way or short way. So, but there are times when you just feel, your mood's changed. So therefore, I think the idea that you can just go and follow how you're feeling at that moment. So maybe music or a podcast, would serve you better at that particular point. There was one thing though, that all of those that you mentioned, one of the things that has cropped up in your podcast, and I sort of was hoping you might say, was about the age thing, about how you're going to be in the future, the why when you want to be playing with your children or going out and having, sure. That was the thing that I was sort of, God, Tarek, mention that.
That's what I call the ultimate legacy. So one's ultimate sort of legacy, like what do they want to leave behind, and that's where ultimate mission comes into it, and all of those good things. So I'm just trying to rattle off an author. It will come to me. And so the idea is, yes, to ultimately, and that's, I did allude to it earlier on around longevity. So
yes,
thinking about
yes, you did,
and like however many wonderful years that we have on this earth, is to kind of still be healthy in mind, body, and spirit, and be able to do some of the things that we did, for example, in our younger years. If we look back, or if we're young at the moment in this present time and listening to this, to go, well, try not to take it for granted, but don't sort of stress yourself or be anxious about kind of aging, because we can age well.
No, absolutely. It's one of those topics, I guess, you mentioned the longevity earlier on, but I suppose for me it's something that I'm very, very aware of, is the finitude of life. And I do think about that, but not in a negative way, in a positive way, because I know that, on average, we're supposed to have 80 years. And so, if you look at where you are on that trajectory, we're all at different places, and people are like, oh, I'm in my 50s. And then, you, technically speaking, I'm only 25 years left. But that's not a negative thing to do. It's like, well, I want to take advantage of every day. And that's a lot of days in that, if you take that as a benchmark. And obviously the things that you're doing, and to some extent the things that I'm trying to transmit with what I'm doing as well, is about that quality of life in the long term, but just planting the seeds at this time in order to allow that longevity in the future. And that's and that comes flowing through with everything that you talk about anyway. If you listen to your podcast, or you investigate your work, and I can see that, and I feel that's a key message.
Yeah, you're right, Alan. Thank you for sharing that. And it's it is looking at it through a particular lens, whilst like being present though. Like I talk a lot about being present, and if we're present in this conversation we're having, it will be much more powerful than if my mind's elsewhere, or in the past, or in the future.
Yeah.
So to try to be anchored into the present moment is helpful, whilst kind of, yes, occasionally thinking about, as Stephen Covey would say, think end in mind, which is habit one.
Okay.
And so he talks about the concept of thinking about your funeral, like what would people be saying about you, who would be showing up at your funeral, what are the types, what will be on your epitaph, and so forth. And that's powerful. That kind of is exciting in a sense, right? To like, if you then have a picture of that, but then not be anxious about that, as you put it.
Yeah,
there's a difference there. But a lot of people perhaps don't want to go there, and for whatever reasons, right?
Oh, right. You're right. Yeah,
trauma, fear, phobia, but actually facing that is liberating, I think.
It is totally and utterly, and I've had conversations with various people, including family members, about our finitude, and I think I've got no qualms about it whatsoever. I'm very much at peace with that. And that's not because of any religious connotation at all. It's just that I just want to take advantage of the time that I have, because it is so ridiculously short, the time that we
And
have
it's
on this earth. So why
yeah,
not? Why not?
and exactly, Alan. If you're interested in many things and you're growing, it definitely is that way.
Yeah.
But I think, and again, this is my belief and my own experiences rather than trying to shove it down people's throats. Is yes, there's a finitude in terms of our fleshly existence, but there's this consciousness, that transcends and will continue on in whatever form that is, and so I think we keep that legacy for the next realm or the next chapter or however you want to term
Yeah.
it, to actually leave a lasting legacy and an imprint and impact generations to come whilst moving on to the next stage, and whatever belief system one has around that. I think there's a beautiful purpose to how life is created, and so we honor what we have and do in this life,
Yeah.
rather than thinking about doing good things because you want to have a better life in the next life. It's
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
totally different paradigms.
Oh no, I mean that's totally different. Yeah. Great. Well, thanks very much. We're sort of going off, which is fine. It's really, really enjoyable to talk about this stuff. There's one thing that I wanted to ask you about, was about high performing coaches, because they often have key rituals. And that's something I don't know anything about. And so what's one mindset shift or daily habit that helps people stay active for the long haul?
I think I alluded to it somewhat. I think the habit
Yeah.
formation, I would say, argue, is a manifestation of that. So
Yeah.
rituals for me, for example, before running an event, a workshop, I'll have rituals. I'll anchor myself into my values, into the present moment, and that would be a ritual for me to get ready for that event, whether I'm teaching or before a podcast. So that's kind of, again, being ritualistic could mean a multitude of things for different people. But I think not checking the phone, as I said, early in the morning, and then going for your set walk or whatever it could be, you're forming
Yeah.
habits which are kind of like, I think, are synonymous with rituals.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I would say about that. Now, I'll have it throughout the day, so I'll make sure that I stop and after this podcast, get up, stretch, move away from the screen and the phone for a few minutes, interact with the dogs, for example, and get some fresh air, get some sunlight. We have plenty of that here in Thailand. And so I make a habit or a ritual of that, and that could be 5 minutes, it could be 10, but it becomes part and parcel of the whole daily ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess once you've been doing these sorts of things over and over again, just becomes so matter of fact. It becomes ingrained into everything that you're doing. So you sort of take it for granted. And one of the things I've noticed is that some of the stuff which you, I, and many other people might just be natural to us might not be for other people. So even though I think sometimes it's good to have repetition. As a jazz trumpet player learning jazz, I would learn all this stuff, and then I would just keep need to revisit it all the time. And you think, I've got that, I've mastered that. And then of course you think, I need to do those exercises, those chromatic enclosures again and again. Or I need to be reminded of the importance of a certain type of mentality when you're soloing. So you need that constant reminder. So I don't want to ever become too blasé about these things. I think it's really important.
I agree. Fundamentals are important. So whether it's your movement practice, whether it's your musical practice, having fundamentals, and making sure that you always perhaps go back to those fundamentals.
Yeah.
It need not always be extravagant, and from a movement perspective, to be fancy or try variation and novel things. That there's a time and place perhaps for that, but it's always the fundamentals, and that's what I go back to that to get me anchored into that ritual or routine, and always be reminded if I am feeling a little down
Yeah.
we're human beings, and so then when there are downs, then I can still push through.
Of course.
I may have a little less energy, but that's more less than often. So,
Yeah, and that's something I've listened to as well about this concept of energy. That's definitely an important factor, because there are days, and you said this yourself, there are days when we are feeling low on energy, but we can still just do these same things, but do them minimally, do them just like pay homage to those tiny little exercises.
right.
Or I think you've mentioned active recovery. So as opposed to doing anything which might be strenuous or physical, you just go for a gentle walk, and that's an active recovery in itself. And that's great to flip it in your mind, so you can make everything accessible. So thanks because I'm gleaning all this stuff from you guys. I don't necessarily go to the great gurus who you alluded to earlier on. I'm not going to go to the Blooms and the Robbins and the Sharmas of this world, but I will. There's so much great information out there that you can glean from so many different sources. And as one of your guests recently, wonderful on muscular stuff, I didn't know anything about this. He was talking about he doesn't actually invent anything himself, but he repackages it himself. I'm sorry, the name Dave.
That's Dave Leo. Yeah.
Yeah, really great guest, fantastic. And I think I want to go and listen to that previous podcast of his, because I listened to the last one. It was it was brilliant.
Yeah, no, that's right. And that's it. If you're humble enough, it's like, well, everyone, you stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So it kind of, so that continues. So long may it continue.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And it's brilliant. So one of the other areas I'd like to look at is, the lessons, because you have worked with coaching professionals. And that's something where it's like, wow, this guy's actually working with these top elite athletes. As you've mentored all these top fitness leaders, what's one coaching principle busy professionals, everyday professionals, can steal to stay motivated and to avoid burnout?
Interesting. So if you're busy at work and you've got a family life and all of these things going on, it's, again, like I said earlier, is finding that space to train for that half an hour to 1 hour and block it, so that becomes your non-negotiable, and find your setting. That meaning that, okay, if it's a few times a week and you prefer outdoors, we'll find a place where you can train outdoors at a park. There are different environments that will help one person to be motivated. If it's not in a gymnasium, well, perhaps you may need to find a space, the environment that can foster care, that can foster trust, guidance. There's very, very good coaches out there.
Yeah.
And that may be what you need. For others, it's like, I need that. I just want to put the headphones on, or just go and do my workout, and it doesn't matter where they are. But I think that would be something to say. Or if it's recreation and you prefer to kind of revolve it around a specific goal, whether it's tennis or, sport-based, whether it's to go on a bushwalk or a hike or something of that nature. That could then also have the social element to it, because there's a social, psychosocial kind of to all of this as well. So there are these different dynamics, and that's dictated by the environment and the place that we choose. So just choose that wisely. Maybe go to a few different sort of gymnasiums or recreational facilities in your area, and put the net out and just get a feel and go, oh yeah, that particular coach or that class just was amazing. I want more of it. You might then have another experience where it's like, no, that service was bad. They were rude. They were abrupt. Okay. So I put the net wide, and especially if either you've hibernated your movement practice, you once were young and vibrant, you're from a kid and to adolescence.
That's great.
And then, you got busy, right? So then that got put on hold. So why continue to put that on hold? And you need to think of the costs of putting that on hold continually, so that would you rather age well or not? And so we avoid degenerative diseases, right? Whether it's neural, of course, muscular, combination of the two, whether it's mental degeneration. Exercise, there's a whole host of scientific evidence to provide to show that exercise and the social dynamic helps to mitigate the risk of any of those types of onsets.
Yes, so important. I love these points. They are so powerful. What you just said. I mean, as you're doing that, I'm just taking some notes there, and this whole concept. Well, the first thing, just to reiterate, because I think it's really blocking time. You know, I use a paper. I like paper. I'm a traditional man. And I actually have a calendar, big paper calendar, and I block times, that are important to me. So that could be, that little session, that exercise, or that cycle ride, or that bit of trumpet practice. These are my non-negotiables. So that's wonderful. And also casting the net as wide as possible, and then filtering that down so that you find the best options within that. And one of the things that I neglected, because I've never really, I'll be honest with you, I've not been a sort of gymnasium man, which sounds a bit odd, because I've done a lot of my stuff from my running training, my cycling, and just being out in nature and playing tennis, those sorts of things. If it rains, which doesn't do very often in Valencia, I will use a local gym, But so I've noticed there are all these wonderful places outside. We've got a very green area in Valencia, Spain. So you go down the park, and you've got these recreational areas which have got things that you can do exercise with, pull-ups, chin-ups, those types of things, with bars, etc. And I always think I must use those. Why not? Why not go and do? And I haven't, but they are accessible to everybody. And many people, if they're like me, like idiots, will just not notice them as they pass them. But they are there to be used and to be taken advantage of. So
what I was sharing earlier in Sydney too, where I'm from, there are a lot of park spaces and these type of outdoor gym setups that councils, they do better than others, and plenty of beaches, for example, in Sydney. So I had access to that. So you need to find what you have access to.
Exactly. And not just ignore it,
Yeah, that's where the awareness comes into it, Alan. So that's where you cast that net a bit wider and don't box yourself into, like literally and metaphorically, into a gym or a small space. That can serve you and continue to do that. But maybe there are some other things that will prompt more interest and excitement and spark greater motivation, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. And the other point that you made earlier on as well, which I think is so important to re-emphasize, is the social element and how important that can be. Being stimulated, you're having that contact with other people as much as possible, and that could obviously manifest itself in a gym setting, or being outside, or going on a hike, as you mentioned. So really, really good points there. I'm really pleased that you've made those as well. Thanks so much for all of that. Great. So with so much fitness information out there, people get overwhelmed. What's one first step for someone wanting to feel stronger and more energized without a total lifestyle overhaul?
They can get a free copy of the book.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd like to reiterate that as well.
With that link, that would be obviously helpful.
Yeah, of course.
I think you're right, Alan. There's so much information out there that
too much saturation.
One might get lost. I think if you don't have that background of understanding physiology, anatomy, human movement in a nutshell, try to speak to maybe an expert. Go and talk to a trainer, someone who's reputable, and just learn a little bit. Early days when I was a teenager, I'd learn a lot by being coached by other people who were professionals. Whether it was in football or other sports or in the gymnasium. I learned a truckload from even paying for services like this.
Yeah.
So I think don't be afraid to get some guidance. It could be a niche thing like tennis, or it could be yoga, or it could be a really good quality class or a quality personal trainer, and learn from them.
Yeah.
Ask them questions, observe. Normally, if they're good, again, they'll guide you into the right direction in terms of what research this, or look this article up, or and some people are a bit more varied in the way that they want to consume information. If you're a bit more info heavy, again, it's just wading through that swamp. Sometimes you can't really see what's down there, and to kind of almost guess sometimes. But we offer a pretty good channel. The Functional Training Institute YouTube channel has like hundreds and hundreds of videos. If you're wanting to learn technique around the kettlebell swing or battling rope, and understand the functional training elements, we provide endless free video content.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'm sure there are other things that then someone says, yeah, I want to learn more about the kettlebell, right? So there might be something that's striking that kind of is more appealing for you. Then you can sort of go down that track and focus in on that. So I think, probably above all is to look at that thing that you want to excel at or in, rather than being general. If it's general, then there's going to be this person's opinion about the way to exercise. Again, that's not individual. It's according to, often anecdotal. They'll say, well, try our 9-minute super workout, but that may not be good for you, right? For example, meaning the person who's listening, where a steady state cardio combined with a little bit of strength might be better than bashing your body for 9 minutes. So that would apply to nutrition too. It's not a one size or stamp that fits all kind of thing. So really be cognizant to that.
Absolutely. I think it's very important, if you have access, to talk to people that obviously have the knowledge that can guide you in those ways. That's great. And there's one thing, you've talked about self-compassion, and I guess there's days when you have to try these things yourself, when you have to taper down because you're feeling your energy is particularly low. So having that self-compassion for you, I guess you probably have those off days, don't you? I would have thought.
Yeah. I think that's awareness in my books, to become more aware of, like we touched on this earlier in the conversation. If you've got your heart set on a hardcore workout, for example, a hardcore session where it's high intensity, but you're really feeling really stressed, you're down, your energy. If you're not so aware or self-compassionate in a sense, then you may make the mistake of going into that high intensity session and then doing more damage than good. So that would be kind of one example.
Yeah, good.
Of cultivating awareness and how that could serve one in that particular context. So really knowing when to change the gears, shift the gear. So, if we look at a gear system, gear 1, low intensity, gear 5 is very high. You might want to learn to use the shifting of gears.
Are you stealing my ideas here, Tarek?
Your idea?
I thought that was my creation, the gear 1 to 5. I had a podcast where I actually didn't get that from anybody, and I use that. I've been using that for years in my own training, And now you're
I didn't make that up. I got this from a mentor of mine.
I didn't get it from anybody. I actually invented that. I thought, oh, sugar.
The global kind of faculty, they're called, out of America. But Dwight is a good friend of mine, a mentor, was one of the founders, and he talked a lot about the gear system.
Oh, okay.
From a point of view of exercise, because that would then equate to the stresses. Because exercise is a stressor, and depending on what gear you're in, right, you'll add more stress or less stress.
Yeah, no, I talked about this particular. I've always used as a training technique for speed work and hills when I used to run a lot, and having that very gear 1 just being very light, and you're going up full intensity at gear 5. So that's something which I still employ to this day if I want a really quick workout.
I think that's a great way to have an analogy and to be able to incorporate that into your practice. And that would be one element of Alan, is just that self-awareness around how one feels in the context of like real stress or having a little niggly injury. When you become more aware of that, then you'll do less damage. You'll learn to kind of manage it, and if you don't have the knowledge yourself and the pain persists, for example, well, you learn to know what track to go down to get that help.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's great you mentioned that, because we're focusing on the physical element very much, and it's having that awareness, being able to sort of self-diagnose. But there's also the mental thing, and one of the things that I've been doing, I mentioned with that little habit track or that data sheet earlier on, is having the mental side. So how are you feeling mentally as well? And there's always a slight apprehension when I talk about this, because people say, oh, well, he's going on about the mental state. Is that really important? Well, it's, as we know, it's exceptionally important to feel good in the mind. And you can also apply that same concept, I suppose, physical and mental. How am I feeling? Am I feeling good? Am I feeling satisfied? Am I feeling pleased, happy, a sense of joy? Or am I feeling genuinely down, a bit depressed, a bit sort of, down in the dumps? So that's another thing, to have that analysis, I guess, would be useful. Or self-awareness, the words that you've used, would be key in that sense.
As we teach in the mental skills training program, we've partnered with Coaching Room in Australia, NLP experts and developmental psychologists on this. Is your inner game drives your outer game. So if anyone's read the book called Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galway, that's a classic book on looking how the inner game, the inner game meaning kind of our thought processes and the kind of tensions between effortless concentration on one hand, and on the other is the tugging of the overthinking, overanalyzing, which then would translate into ill-performed shot, for example, a forehand or a backhand, and therefore frustration coming out and so forth. So the inner game, in this case, it's called inner game of tennis. Inner game drives the outer game. The outer game could be tennis, it could be football, it could be piano, it could be drums, whatever it is that the outer game, it translates into out to.
Yes, and if you've been exposed to those high pressure moments, you mentioned the piano just flippantly at the end there, and I know about that. I mean, crikey, I've had my fair share of problems when I was a music student, of getting so nervous, the mental side taking over, and having to be subjected to play in front of top pros in order to overcome my nerves. It was really hard work. So that's great. Thank you. We've covered so much. It's been a real joy, honestly. Obviously, we've gone up in different directions, but I've really enjoyed which is always the best conversations do that. And there's so much it's such a massive area, isn't it? And one of the key things I guess I'm always trying to espouse is getting down simplicity. And we all have our own ways of doing that. And you want to speak about so much, so when you get excited and you sort of, there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this, and you want to cram it all in. And in the end, I guess we as individuals need to take our own track and keep it as simple as possible and what applies to us.
Exactly, Alan.
I'm genuinely intrigued by what you've mentioned, because I've looked at your website and I'm now thinking more about the other side of the, you've mentioned kettlebells, and I've looked at some of your videos, and you do courses. I've noticed that as well. So you've piqued my interest.
Yeah, well, you can take a kettlebell into your home and train with it there, for example. You can do a breathwork course and learn how to control your breathing and use it to create more stress, use it to relax yourself. And ultimately, there's a lot of good stuff out there, Alan, and we're all a voice for hopefully some good, and we share ideas and we disseminate hopefully some good information from this conversation.
Oh yeah, for sure. And when you get really high quality guests on your show as well, that's always very informative, and you can glean so much from these people. And why not go to the best? You have access to them, don't you?
Exactly. Yeah, you've said it best. There's so many people doing good stuff, including what you're doing. Really being a conduit for these conversations to people to freely access. And as I've stated earlier, if people want to check out www.functionaltraininginstitute.com or FTI Global on Instagram, the YouTube channel, Functional Training Institute. We've got plenty of free stuff. That's good stuff that, hopefully might be a game changer for someone. And if someone wants to go more deep, well, of course, we've got education around different methods, from mental skills to breath work to movement restoration, recovery, functional training.
Yeah, you have a great array of different services there, don't you? You really do. And obviously I'll drop all of that in the show notes. I'll drop as much as I possibly can. If there's anything in particular, I mean, obviously I'll go to the usual platforms anyway, but if there's anything else, please share it with me in an email. I'll put that into the show notes as well.
Yeah, most definitely. If people want to reach out to me, I'm on Facebook or probably LinkedIn under Tarek Michael Chouja, so they can follow me there. So I respond to people.
Oh, good. You're more of a LinkedIn man, are you? Because I am as well. You know, I'm not massive on anything else but on LinkedIn. I try to do things so hard.
Yeah, just out of necessity or across socials, but I try to minimize that. Otherwise, Tarek, Tarek, at functionaltraininginstitute.com. Usually I check the emails regularly, of course, and so I can be contacted through email too.
Okay, great. Well, that's brilliant. So thanks so much, Tarek. I've really appreciated everything and your time. Absolutely wonderful that you would come along and speak on my humble pod. And I really appreciate it. So,
thanks for facilitating the chat.
Good.
Yeah.
I shall bid you farewell, and all the listeners out there, you know where you can get in contact with Tarek, and I'll drop everything in the show notes anyway. So thanks very much, Tarek. Goodbye for now. Goodbye. Bye.